Okay, and our next speaker needs absolutely no introduction. Please welcome our Executive Director, Ahmed Rehab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Blessings and peace be upon you all, our wonderful, powerful, fearless Muslim community here in Chicago and allies. Thank you for being here tonight. I say fearless because if you have faith, you cannot have fear. If you have faith, you cannot have fear because you understand, as we Muslims say, you heard us say it at prayer just a few moments ago before the banquet. Allahu Akbar, we say. God is great. God is greater. Greater than what? Fill in the blanks. If there is tyranny, there is a God who is greater. If there is hunger, if there is famine, if there is disease, if there is murder, if there is hate crimes, if there are any challenges, we believe that God is greater than all of these things. And we draw our power, faith in God, in order to meet the challenges that He allows to exist. This isn't paradise. It was never designed to be paradise. This is earth. There is pain, there is suffering. That's not a surprise. How we respond to it is the singular task that we must engage ourselves in. Ask yourself, what is my role at this moment in order for me to sail through this tribulation and to register my faith in God? That is what we Muslims believe, and that is what drives me at this moment and every moment in this activism. It must be built on our spirituality and our values. Before we came here a few days ago, there was a campaign by the Zionist Organization of America to shut down this hall. They were proudly issuing press releases and action alerts calling on individuals to flood Drury Lane with calls in order to cancel our event. They did the same thing, unfortunately, with the CAIR National Office, and the Marriott, I believe it was, canceled the event. They cowered in fear and they shut them down, and they had to move to a mosque. They did the same thing with the AMP here, the American Muslims for Palestine. I think it was the Hyatt, for the November event that's always in Chicago, and they also, unfortunately, cowered in fear and shut down that event. They try to do this here, but instead we have a sold-out house of 1,000 of our community members. We shut them down. And it isn't because we are better than CAIR National or better than AMP. We're in this together. But it's because Drury Lane stood with us, and I want to give them a shout out. They understood what hate mongers look like and how they sound like, and they understand the message we've been putting on this stage for 19 years now. Engagement is key. Building relationships is key. Changing hearts and minds is key. We speak tonight at a difficult moment, at a major challenge in our history as American Muslims, both locally and in lieu of international affairs. I kid you not when I say that this is probably the craziest, busiest time for me in my office, including in the post-9/11 aftermath. This is a crazier time in many ways, and I'll explain why I say that. It isn't just in terms of the spike in hate crimes and hate incidents, or the nature of these incidents. One of them that we all know about, the murder, the brutal stabbing of a 6-year-old boy 26 times by a man, a veteran, who was yelling, "All Muslims must die." You know, as I was writing a press release about another hate crime, I stepped out of my home office for a breather. And I came back to my computer, and I saw that one of my young sons, I have 3, had laid some Legos, a little house, a little castle, a bunch of Lego pieces, right on the laptop, right on the paperwork. And my first instinct was, oh, not now, not here. Let me clean up this clutter. But then I stood for a moment and I contrasted the Lego and right behind it, the screen and the heavy material that I was working on the screen. And at that moment, I thought about what a child thinks of versus what we adults are dealing with and putting them through. A few more days later, woke up in the morning, my kids were running around. They heard me coming down, they tried to hide. I pretended to look for them, we played a little hide and seek. I could see them sticking out from behind a couch and from behind a table. I pretended I couldn't see them, they were giggling with excitement, even though it was so clear and obvious that I could see them, but they are children. And as I passed them by, they had a huge sense of accomplishment. We were able to hide. And again, I thought about the world of children. My brothers and sisters, we stand today at a moment in which 3,000 children like them are slaughtered from the skies by the blessings of the civilized world as a counter-terrorism initiative. And these children are forced to play hide and seek, but it isn't with their parents. It's with armed men, with artillery, and helicopters and airplanes. And oftentimes they don't make it out of the game. And again, this is happening on our watch. And look, horrible things have happened before around the world. But what's so crazy about this is not only are we not condemning the obvious, these are children. 3,000. There's 1,000 people in this sold-out room, mashallah. Just imagine for a visual, this room expanded 3 times in any direction you want, and fill it with children around the tables, and that's what we're talking about. 7,000 civilians. It isn't just the children, it's the mothers and fathers whose lives matter also. 7 times this room. A collateral damage. What's unique about what's happening in Palestine, and Gaza is part of Palestine, what's unique about that is that it is happening with our silence, no, worse than silence, with our blessing, with the blessing of our leaders. Not just in words and moral blessing, giving their moral blessings to it as the right thing to do, the moment for us to rise to moral leadership, but through funding billions of dollars and providing machinery and weaponry to engage in these war crimes. We have to call them for what they are, war crimes. Genocide, ethnic cleansing. And the reason I begin with this isn't because suddenly we've veered our mission into talking about global affairs, but this is an interconnected world. And the death of this young man in our backyard, this young 6-year-old Palestinian who was stabbed 26 times, is not dissociated or divorced from what is happening in Gaza. It isn't divorced from the reaction of our leaders and the support for what is happening and what this has done in terms of creating an atmosphere of dehumanization. That is the word I want everybody to remember today. That is what we are ultimately fighting. That has always been the problem. It was the problem when the Belgians murdered millions of Congolese in Africa, and nobody batted an eye. The Belgians at the time were seen as civilized, and the Congolese as barbaric, as savage. Dehumanization was at play when the British murdered to extinction the native inhabitants of the island of Tasmania that I had the privilege of visiting south of Australia, hunting them like rabbits while wearing white gloves and their pinkies sticking as they drink their tea. Civilized. What is civilized and what is barbaric? And today, this dehumanization continues and is necessary in order to be able to pull off what is morally unconscionable and get away with it, or so they think. It was necessary when the United States went on an ill-fated, misguided war in Iraq that caused the murder of 1 million people. Dehumanization was necessary. And by extension, those who try to speak out and fight this dehumanization and cause a problem for this war machine, for this military-industrial complex, need to be dehumanized in equal measure and censored so that their voice and their pushback can be nipped at the buds. And that is what the Zionist Organization of America's effort was all about. They understand that CAIR-Chicago is an effective organization. They don't mind having thousands protesting and chanting, but they don't want organizations that are able to talk to the media, talk to the halls of power, build up local leadership. We need our voices on the streets. I joined these rallies and these protests, strength in numbers, and we need the institutions. And it tells me that we're doing something right if they're trying to shut the institutions down from speaking. Our voices are our power. This institution, CAIR-Chicago, was built by you in order to give power to your voices through our work. When we talk about CAIR-Chicago, we're not talking about the staff and the board and the volunteers. The real organization is everybody in this room and beyond, because we all have different roles to play. The community gave us the mandate to speak for it, to fight for it. They fund us, they support us, they show up. You are part and parcel of this organization. And we want to identify key narratives to dissect, analyze, and expose. And the first is dehumanization. My brothers and sisters and friends and allies, this isn't about a political discussion of one state, two state. That's not what CAIR-Chicago does. I've never had that conversation with anybody. This is about the basic, logical, rational position of a moral, you would think, human being, that human life is important, is valuable. That whatever gaslighting you can engage in, and both Abdel Nasser and Nabila mentioned how just standing up for human rights, a message that they share out there, just standing up for life can be seen because someone is Muslim or someone supports life for Palestinians, how dare they, that they're supporting terrorism. That is gaslighting. And I want to make very clear for those, every time I'm in the media and they want to bring in, do you condemn Hamas? No. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Let me make this as clear as possible. For anyone to say the H word every time a conversation about Palestinian lives and livelihood is discussed, every time they bring up that word, that is your first red flag that this isn't about history, human rights, what is right, what is good. This is a dirty, cheap little political discussion. It's not as if our moral position is not clear. And let's, for the record, state it. As a Muslim, I stand against the death, the targeting of civilians of any background, religion, ethnicity, or nationality, including the ones in Israel. And I don't say this because it's the right PR thing to say. I don't say this in order to just, go around the conversation and then get to what I want to talk about. These are our religious values. These are our genuinely held religious beliefs. But for us to be able to have the courage to say that, and then look around us in our society and see complete cowardice from so many circles, to be able to say the same thing when it comes to Palestinians, then it is us who have to say, do you condemn what is happening to these people? There isn't a single mosque. There isn't a single center. Let's be clear, all right? Let's be ultra clear, that has a sign, I stand with Hamas. Have you ever seen one? I challenge anyone to find a sign on any mosque or front lawn belonging to a Muslim that has such a sign. And yet we're asked time and time again, do you condemn? Do you condemn? But I look around in my communities and I see in front of synagogues and centers, I stand with Israel. So I think it's fair for me to say, what do you stand with? When at the moment the right-wing Israeli government is engaged in these genocidal tactics for political purposes, well beyond responding to the murder of Israeli civilians. Then I must ask, do you stand with that? When these human beings are called human animals by a leader in that military, not by some, distant blogger who has nothing to do with this organization, this entity that is the Israeli army, I must ask, do you stand with that? When 3,000 children die and we don't hear condemnations, we don't hear cries of sorrow, we don't see rallies or protests or letters of support or our elected officials standing up and saying, this is morally wrong, we must ask, what do you stand with? That is for us to ask. We have to pivot from being on the defensive to being on the offensive, because we have nothing to apologize for. And those who stand with genocide have everything to apologize for. And it is this environment that has created what we are seeing now at CAIR-Chicago, this dehumanization. That is at the heart of these hate crimes. When that is all you hear in the media, and the media has been incredibly lopsided and one-sided, it is incredible for me to say that the most honest media in the United States today is The Onion. That is the God-honest truth. It's crazy. There is fear. There are those in journalism, in media, that understand what's going on, that have the right moral compass. But there is fear from the monopolized line, that you can't go there. You can't say this. You can't show these images. And let me be clear, and I've said this in the media countless times, dehumanization happens in two ways, not one. One is assertion. That's probably what everybody's familiar with. That means when somebody asserts, these are human animals, human shields, whatever narratives that dehumanize Palestinians is different and apart from the rest of humanity. But in addition to the assertion, there is the omission, by omission, when the suffering is not shown, when the children dying are not talked about, when the everyday life of Palestinians is never mentioned, as if they're a bunch of militants, 2 million of them, sitting there with guns, just waiting for the next attack or the next raid. There is no sense of a Palestinian street, a Palestinian family. These people have weddings, and they have parties, and they have birthdays, and they have funerals, and they have grandmothers, and they have hospitals and clinics, and they have everyday life. But you'll be forgiven to believe that none of this exists because you never see it. We're not allowed to see it, because if you see it, you may feel sorry for them. You may actually have a heart and say, oh my God, this is wrong, and start calling your elected officials or writing letters to the editor, so you're not allowed to see it. Omission is dehumanization. So in our capacity at CAIR-Chicago, we fight dehumanization in pushing back against the assertive statements that are hateful and unfair and unjust, and by shedding light in the spaces where cameras don't want to point their lenses and light doesn't want to shine. By telling these stories, by speaking to the human beings at the center of this, and not falling in the back and forth about do you condemn this or that. This is about injustice. If a media or politician is talking about Palestine to the American people and fails to mention the word oppression, they are lying to the American people. If they talk to the American people to try to explain this complex, long-term historical situation without mentioning the word occupation, they are lying to the American people. And furthermore, if they talk about Israel as a monolith, we stand with Israel, without allowing the nuanced understanding of the reality that Israel has far-right Likud genocidal goons, and it has people who are for peace and who hate what is going on and are trying to speak out, much like our Jewish communities here in the United States, they are lying to the American people. It is crazy to me that our president, who, to my understanding, is a progressive liberal president, is supporting the most far-right coalition in Israel ever. You know, think about this. There is no liberal, progressive, Democrat president in the United States who would give 1/10, 1/100th of this support to someone like that here, to a far-right leader here. But somehow when it comes to Israel, it feels normal. And the American people, because they don't know any better, it's just Israel. Yeah, we support Israel. But it's insane when you think about it. And secondly, and similarly to this point, every political leader here of any party has no problem standing up and criticizing an American president of the same party or of an opposing party in strong, stern words, including in the middle of war. But somehow when it comes to a foreign leader, none of these leaders think that they can stand up and put any criticism to this foreign leader. Isn't that insane? That is something really, really interesting. Our own country, they have the courage to face up to the leadership. But for a foreign country, they don't. My friends, we are in the middle of a battle for the soul of America. This isn't just about Palestine. This isn't just about the Middle East. It isn't even just about the Muslim community, which is being drawn into the atmosphere that's created by the cowardice of the media and politicians, allowing or putting our community as sitting ducks to these attacks that we're trying to fight. It isn't just hate crimes, it's hate incidents, it's censorship, it's harassment, it's bullying at schools, on the streets. The cases we are getting, 17 times as many as we would get in a period like this, are of all of these types. And one area that stuns me is bullying from companies, corporate entities. I've never seen this before, not even post 9/11. We're talking about a corporate board that would see fit to send a letter as if it were a foreign embassy that was obliged to comment on foreign affairs and take a stern, strong, narrow position on a fluid situation and force that upon the rest of the employees. And of course, because there is a power dynamic, there is an injustice in the situation that if you're an employee whose livelihood depends on your career, on your work, on your job, you're going to have to zip the lip and keep walking. You'll be afraid of retaliation. And these letters will rightly express support for civilians who are dying on one side, but have nothing to say about the many more thousands dying on the other. They'll provide charitable links for one side, but disallow charitable links for the other. They will say we provide psychosocial services for those who are impacted by what is happening to one side, but nothing about what is happening to the other. So much for diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI has failed the first real stress test. Because, you know, they come to our community, these corporate leaders, and they talk about these things, and we engage them, but we are done with talk. This is a time for action. This is a time to call out whatever hypocrisy, whatever double standard, whatever bait and switch we are facing. When I say fearless, and we began with fearless, that is what we ought to do now, without fear of consequences. Without fear, everything is in God's hands. Nothing is in the hands of a corporation or a foreign or domestic military. This is what may seem to be the case, but in reality, there is a just, all-seeing God. And our role as Muslims, and our role as people of faith and people of conscience, whatever drives you, whatever sense of moral compass drives you, is to not be afraid to stand up to injustice, to double standards, and to hypocrisy, and to speak truth to power just like our young leaders were doing here and do every day in Springfield. And we need to understand the nuances of this work. There are I want to close with a few clear items for us to keep in mind. What can you do? We come here today and I feel the apprehension in the community. I feel a sense of fear in some quarters, including among some leaders. Can we say this? Can we say that? Can we do this? Can we do that? Because they're coming down hard. I mean, I've never seen a student group be targeted by a Senate resolution calling them terrorist sympathizers or terrorist supporters. The Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, a Senate resolution. These are students, American students, engaged in peaceful protest. They're being doxxed, they're being harassed and bullied, and now the highest echelons of the power dynamics of America are putting them in their target, in their laser, as a threat. What happened to freedom of speech? What happened to organizing on campus? What happens to the days of student activism during the Vietnam War? What happened to American pastime of speaking your conscience without fear? What is happening to this country under this leadership? Americans need to understand that this issue, the reason why Israel-Palestine is so important, because it is the most corrosive issue inside the entire barrel of corruption that we have in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And that if we allow leaders who are beholden to special interest to run the conversation, to get to decide what is the moral compass of this nation, what is right and what is wrong, and other power structures to get to decide what's on the media, what you see and what you don't see, and get to decide what you can say and can't say, and when you can say it or can't say it, where you can organize or can't organize. If we allow that, then that is the real end of America as we know it. We are fighting for the soul of this country through the work that we do. This isn't just about Muslim civil rights. And we're not fighting alone. Have you seen the African American voices? Obviously, we have a lot in our Muslim community, but beyond, who've stood up courageously. Have you seen the Latino voices? Have you heard the Asian voices? Have you seen the Jewish voices? And these voices are loud, and you can't miss them. And so we pledge that just as we fight against the monolithizing of Islam and Muslims into its worst possible iteration, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, this or that, we will never allow the monolithization or the monolithizing of any other community. We recognize that communities have diversity in them. And with us tonight are Jewish leaders whose voices have been ultra clear, not just on October 7th and after, in terms of condemning, of course, what happened there, but also what is happening to the Palestinians, but since day one. And I want to recognize these leaders who are with us tonight from the JVP, Judy Levy from JCUA, and Kalman Resnick, who is one of my biggest allies. Jews for Justice and Jewish Voices for Peace. They have held loud rallies calling for a ceasefire. They have brought 150,000 letters against what is happening to the desks of elected officials. 150,000 letters. They call to check up on us. Hate will not divide us. Hate will unite us. We will not be shy to point out the silence and cowardice in many ranks of the Jewish leadership in Chicago and beyond. Quite frankly, and I say this to my friends, the fact that I recognize you does not mean that I will not be clear in that point. I'm disappointed in the ADL, a supposedly civil rights organization, rather than standing up for human rights and civil rights, attacking our children and their right to speak. And there are many other organizations we can point to, synagogues, the AJC, the Zionist Organization of America. They're doing the dirty work of a foreign government in this land. I will call you out. I will look at you and say, what are you doing? What do you stand for? To your face and in public. But to do this is not to forget to thank our friends who stand up in good faith. And to thank our friends is not to give a pass to others who don't. We have nuanced leadership. What can you do? The first thing I want you to do is to believe that you can. If you don't believe that you can change someone's opinion, you'll never do that. You'll never be able to do it. If you don't believe that you can call someone who is in elected office and influence them, you'll never influence anyone. If you don't believe that you can get an article published in the New York Times, you'll never get it published. If you don't believe that you can run for office and stand on your values without having to change your values and still serve this country to the best of your ability, you will never succeed in running for office. Believe that you can. The second thing is tell your story. We need to learn to tell our story. Muslims, for some reason, we haven't been really good at that. We may talk about numbers and data and historical narratives, but we don't tell human stories. Even in our rallies, there are chants, the hey-ho's, the hey-ho-ho, from here to here. All due respect for these chants. What is the story? Who are you? Who is dying there? Tell me about your cousin. Tell me about your uncle. Tell me about your grandfather and grandmother who were uprooted. Tell their story by name and face. Tell the story of every child that's died by name and face. That is a message to all of us. It's not just to Palestinian activists. That is our role. You want something to do? Find a story and tell it to someone. Write a letter to the editor. Call a news desk. Talk to an official. Write a letter to an elected official and tell them a story. Stories are powerful. My Jewish friends understand this more than anybody. 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust is a horrible thing to hear on the ear, but it doesn't instigate as much emotion as the story of Anne Frank itself was able to do. Obviously, we're not talking about the 6 million souls. I'm talking about the digit. When you put a number out versus a story, there's a different feeling, a different emotion, regardless of how gargantuan and monstrous that number may be. 3,000 children killed. We say it every day. Falls on deaf ears. But talk about one story. When we talked about Wadia, it was important for us to humanize his story. It was important for us to get ahead of the narrative. This is why these organizations are important. Remember what happened the last time 3 good souls from our community were essentially executed in a hate crime in North Carolina? They said, well, they tried to say, it was as a result of a parking dispute. And by the time they figured out it was a hate crime, that parking dispute narrative had created too much noise. It's important that we have organizations that know what they're doing, know how to get ahead of things and put the right narrative out. Because when you do that, everybody gets in line early and quickly. The media, it's been reported on nationally and globally, up to the President of the United States who has to call and understand what has happened and respond to it. No one can play around. No one can give you a different story. That is media work. Tell your story. The third thing is love each other. I want you to listen to me really carefully now. What I'm supposed to tell you is unite, but I don't say that because we always talk about unity and it tends to become noise, just another word, unity. Frankly, if you unpack unity, the whole point of it is to love each other. We cannot unite unless we love each other. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll tell you what I mean without mincing words, because we're not here to waste your time or our time. For every masjid that has a board that is in a mini civil war, fix your problems. Love each other. For every 2 organizations that can't get along for the sake of the common good of this community, fix your issues. Love each other. For every community that is this or that, a Sunni, a Shia, this or that within the community. Figure out your issues, love each other, unite. You know why you must unite? If for no other reason, you're all hated as one by those who hate you. You are hated as one. There isn't a different color or tongue or this board member or that sect. It's just Muslims. So you better unite as Muslims. And unity means many things. It means collaboration. It means coordination. There may be love, but we need to coordinate beyond the love. Tonight, we have another massive Muslim event somewhere else in the south side of Chicago, the mass event, and I pray for their success tonight. But again, quite frankly, this shouldn't be the case, quite frankly. We should band around one cause at least per night. There are 365 nights in a year. This isn't to point fingers. These are our friends. We love them, they love us. But if whoever declares a date first, everybody else has to get in line and support the cause as one ummah. If we're in a position where we think, oh, that's their business, this is my business, we don't get it. We can't build mosques without protecting them. And we can't protect mosques without the support of the congregations. We're one community. We have to have these serious conversations, brothers and sisters. You ask us to stick our necks out there, and we're happy to do it. We get doxxed, we get the hate mail. We're not victims, we're not heroes, but we're going to be honest communicators with you as much as the outside world. So help me God. And we need to have honest conversations. This should be the start, but not the end. We need to talk about what ails this community and to bring true unity through love, collaboration, and coordination for a common cause. The cause for justice. That is what drives us, and against hate, for the safety of our children and other people's children who ought to be playing with Lego and hide and seek instead of dying in the streets or in their homes being stabbed or in an open air prison from the skies. Don't wait for a crisis. I've had mosque leaders call me, what can we do? And I answer the question to the best of my ability, but not without first asking, what did you do last week or last month or last year about this question? You want an honest answer about what we can do? Do you want an honest answer? That's an actual question. Do you want an honest answer? Nothing we're going to do today is going to be as effective as you would want for today. But there is a chance, if we do what is necessary, 10 years from now, we will be completely effective. To have been effective today, the work had to start 10 years ago. Let's be honest with each other. Oh, Brother Ahmed, all these politicians are taking this position. Oh, you want to fix it overnight? Now that we've woken up and there's a crisis, let me pick up the phone. Hey, everybody, change your positions. My community would like you to change them. Brother Rami Nashashibi went to meet the president. He's being attacked by segments of our own community on Twitter as a sellout of sorts. Really? So we're not supposed to engage those who have influence and attempt to influence how they view things with the truth? We're supposed to sulk in a corner and let it go? Rami's a hero. He went there and he told strong stories. He told stories to the President of the United States, him and those who were with him. Those who are meeting with Jan Schakowsky or anybody. It isn't about, if we're meeting to take pictures, you have every right to criticize. But if the meetings are meant to engage and influence, then absolutely support that. Support engagement. Tell the story. Ask yourself every night before you go to bed, what stories have I told? What effort have I done? And every day you feel angry about something, make an action. If someone sends you an email about a ceasefire, to text this number to, do it. To write this letter to an editor or to an elected official, do it. And people call me and they say, I've done it, nothing changes. What now? And again I say, it won't change overnight. But if you don't do it now, we'll be in the same position 10 years ago as we were in a similar position post 9/11 20 years ago. These things add up, and they do make a difference. When I get a call from Senator Tammy Duckworth, it isn't because she just woke up one day and said, oh, I like this guy, let me call him. It's because she's received a lot of your calls and your emails. If at that level, that's a step forward, to have that engagement, and it gave me the opportunity to tell her our human stories face to face. It makes a difference. Every little step makes a difference. Invest in what's working. You have organizations that are able to have progress, able to change narratives in the media, push back against the monopoly that is out there in terms of what is happening here or abroad. Invest in organizations like this and others. We have so many other wonderful organizations represented tonight. Support those leaders who show courage and who stand on the right moral ground. Don't just applaud for them. Don't just thank them. Support them. Know their names, visit their websites, support them in your personal capacities. I understand 501c3s, we don't do that, but this is America. This is a place in which everybody should be civically engaged. If you don't like something, find something you like, and when you like it, support it so you get more of it. And we have here a table of wonderful elected officials that have stood with our community about this issue, and many, please stand up. These leaders have shed tears for our children. These leaders have challenged their peers. These leaders have spoken to the media. So finally, my brothers and sisters, it is important to do the work, but we have to charge our spirituality. But you can't just charge and then leave. So I tell those of us who contend to be religious, and I'm one of them, let's move beyond the notion that all that we need are mosques, and then more mosques. And I see the imams looking at me right now like, what are you talking about? But I've had these conversations with them and they actually agree. Because I use language carefully, it's my job, right? I said, that's not all we need. I didn't say we don't need it, we need it. But let's never settle for the notion that to be religious, the best and only thing you can do is to build a mosque. And then when it's been built, to expand it. And then when it's expanded, to get it better carpets and chandeliers. And then to build a section for this and a section for that. I'm glad we have that. I'm glad we do. Every community deserves that. These places, they harbor our children, they harbor our education, they harbor our spiritual growth. This is not to knock it. It's to knock stopping there. And to think that this has checked the box of giving to our community. We need to move beyond that. This is where we have spiritual recharging. But imagine if I gave you the best charger on earth and then denied you the iPhone. We charge in order to plug in and then cause change. But in the same way, activism means nothing without the spirituality. And if I try to use that phone and be a great activist, it'll be all too soon before I run out of battery. I'm going to need a charger. They come together, the spirituality and the activism. We are lacking on that latter part. We have to invest in it. Again, to be specific, I am calling for a 10% project where every mosque that brings in millions commits 10% of that income towards any form of activism they deem fit. Civic participation, civil rights, I'm not asking for CAIR-Chicago. That would be an allocated, earmarked grant in order to develop this community in that space, so 5 years from now, when I'm getting the calls, we're not saying just send the letter or make the call. We have grassroots power in these spaces. The last thing I want is for us to be here in numbers, for us to get strong support tonight. And then this ends, and then everybody goes home a month later, and we go to sleep until the next crisis. That is the last thing I want. The silver lining in this cloud, if there is one, is for us to wake up and realize that in order to be prepared for a crisis, we have to be prepared every day. We have to build towards that every day. And even without crisis, we're building our strength and our power, we will be able to promote our values and stand up to the censorship, stand up to the demonization, stand up to the dehumanization of us or anyone. This isn't about Muslims only. These principles apply to all of our fellow human beings, and as Muslims, we must fight for all. Fighting for all is fighting for one. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.